Well, I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us. Well, we got to get to 3 trillion. We're at 10%. To make things work, you've got to have your every part of your body and every part of your mind focused on this for like 5 years. Try that. It's really hard to do. And so to organize yourself around doing that, you need a higher purpose. And I also think you often need a lower purpose. Like the higher purpose for me.
What's a lower purpose?
Well, I love the idea of getting a drone and having light fentanyl-laced urine spraying on analysts who tried to screw us. So that's my lower purpose. And, yeah, and others. But the higher purpose for me was to get this nation to be the preeminent power in the world, because whatever faults we have, they're nothing like anyone else's.
We've got some amazing questions from this audience. And we got a bunch of Palantirians in the room, so here we're going to go. Are you ready? This first question, it's as if Peter Thiel were here, I think. The question is, what are the 2 most important insights for running a company that most people would disagree with? It's a very Peter question, because one of his famous interview questions.
Well, it depends what I think they mean a tech company. So most people believe that building a company is, you need someone who's actually good at business. It's not just being good at tech. And you will fail. If you just have a tech person or just have a business person, you will fail. And so your co-founding team, you need business sechel. It won't work otherwise.
You think people would disagree with that?
I think people in tech, I was talking to a very, very talented person who's a legend, and we were debating in like a very private forum, and this person was telling me, like, basically just go to Caltech and hire the smartest person you've ever met, and then you'll get, and that's just, it's not true. It's just, and that's what people believe, yeah.
Okay, so this is a different one, also mentions Peter. What would a 25-year-old Alex and Peter...
Oh, by the way, the other thing on that is it's crazy important to do partner selection in your personal life, which is another thing people do not believe.
What do you mean by that? Explain.
Like, you got to find someone who actually likes you in your personal life. That's really hard, because many people who are doing things, that the person they're with doesn't like them. And like or be alone. But like you can't have like this thing at home that's bad. It won't work.
I won't disagree with that. What would a 25-year-old Alex and Peter today start and work on if they had the chance? So you're 25 years old now,
yeah,
and it's today. It's 2025.
I'll give you a very self-serving, but I think
and I say you cannot choose Palantir.
Well, we got to get to 3 trillion. We're at 10%. Well, let me. I don't know the answer to that, but like I believe it might actually be that, but I'll try to get a less self-serving answer. But the thing is, a mistake I've seen people make over and over is you assume the best thing is the new thing, when in fact maybe the thing you know could be 10 times bigger. And again, I saw this at Palantir. Like, I revere everyone who is at Palantir and most people who left. And I certainly never badmouth a Palantirian who left, even though, of course, there are a couple that, whatever. But I do think a mistake that I've seen people make is they think the new thing was going to be better than the thing they had. And in my experience, just in general, you want to hang on to dear life to the thing you have that's working. So that is actually my real answer. But one of my things, I think answers that are true are often not persuasive. Like, that's a true answer I think is probably not persuasive. But it is true, but not persuasive. Because I don't think there's anything in the world that I or Peter and I could work on together and we still are working on it. So that proof's in the pudding. Like, and Stefan is the three of us are still at Palantir. So it's like, that's a really good example of true answer, demonstrably provable true, and no one believes it. Because it sounds like, well, of course we should be saying startup number 5, 6 that everyone could join. But if it couldn't be that, I don't know, most of my conversations with Peter are actually just about philosophy and like politics, or like at a high level, not who does what, mimetic conditions. There are alternate universes where Peter and I were like still in some permutation fighting. Like when we met at Stanford, like our relationship now and our relationship then is jarringly similar. Like we get on the phone, it's like, yeah, okay, but I think this, you think that, and we discuss. It's probably a little less.
Who wins that when that happens?
It really. It's very hard.
How do
by
you
the way,
determine who wins?
It's very hard to know who's right till like 3 or 4 years later, and I think if you talk to him, he'd be like, "I was right most of the time," but if you talk to me, I would think I was right most. So, I actually think it's pretty even, but the thing that's actually really important about the dialogue is, and honestly, it doesn't matter, because without Peter, he was right about one thing, picking me. I might not have picked me. So it's like, it's like he can be right all day. I think the most important thing about my relationship with Peter, though, is just like there's a way in which the rigor you need to get far with him in an argument, and I would argue conversely, it seeps into Palantir. Like you can't just make a superficial argument and think that's going to fly in any way. Even if you say, Peter's, let's assume he's right, I'm wrong, but the rigor of the argument would matter as much as who's right or wrong in the argument. And that's really important. I think it's been very important for Palantir, because things that we believe at Palantir and do at Palantir have to survive a lot of rigor and people contesting them.
Okay, so here's a great question that relates to this. This is somebody who says, I've worked at Palantir for 10 years in the audience right now. Many people ask me how much our culture has changed in that time. And for me, the most notable thing is how much it hasn't changed. How have you persevered this company culture for so long? Do you think there's something you specifically do?
I mean, I don't know. It's look, I do fight for Palantirians in ways they see, in ways they don't. I legitimately really care. We have a set of broad precepts that I try to enforce, including pushing responsibility to the front, giving responsibility to people who deserve it, meritocracy, radical meritocracy, openness, honesty, very low corruption. I mean, like, obviously we don't do any normal corruption, but like, well, lots of people do.
The laws are changing on that, by the way. I don't know if you heard.
Yeah, we're a very...
Is that going to be bad or good for you, by the way?
I don't... At Palantir, we're allergic to anything that looks like internal corruption. And I would say, and that includes, like, for example, we have prominent people, we have children of very prominent people at Palantir. We have children of people who are from the, pretty bad situation. Everyone at Palantir, I have never been a part of a decision where someone said, oh, we're not going to promote or give this person on any other reason besides accomplishment. And I would say, I am completely allergic to anything that's other than that, and as are most Palantirians. I think if I tried to do something, or someone at Palantir tried to do something that was low integrity on those vectors, most Palantirians would be like, this stops or I quit, or this will stop. and Palantirians would unionize or something around that. So I think you can't do that if you want complicated products. So it's like we build like PG, Apollo, Foundry, Ontology are some of the most complicated software products that have ever been built. And if there's any modicum of dishonesty, non-meritocratic behavior, purposeful non-fairness, which I would call forms of corruption, bigotry along any race, religion, gender, you will see that the product does not reflect the honest situation, and then your company fails. So, like on that stuff, not to mention Palantirians have no tolerance for that. Maybe Palantirians here, anyone disagree with that? Yeah. So we're complete zealots on this. And I would say that's one of the reasons people were skeptical of investing in us, and maybe they should have been. But like in the end, that's why we are doing such a good job winning.
Before we wrap up,
and why so many Palantirians, by the way, like, look at Palantirians everywhere.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to actually mention one other thing, which is something that you mentioned at the top, almost in passing, and it's something that's dear to my heart, only because I am it too, as is one of my
We're actually
children.
a couple.
It's a joke. Dyslexia. I want to talk about dyslexia, because you mentioned that you would have struggled to write this book, and you run the company, you're dyslexic, and I think you think of dyslexia as genuinely a superpower. I wish my son was here actually to see you talk about this right now. But what is it that you think is the superpower that you have as a result of this? And when did you figure all this out?
Well, I mean, I was in the closet about being dyslexic until about 5 or 6 years ago. And then a buddy of mine actually in Germany I was like, you know what, I'm just tired. Like, God, why do I have to be in the closet about this? It's like, so, any case, but it was...
You want to talk to people about it?
No, I just was tired of, like, I don't know, it was like...
But you knew you were dyslexic since you were a kid.
I was tested, and I had special stuff when I was a kid, and no, I was very dyslexic, and there's a longer story there, and I'm happy to talk about that, but when I came out and started, and then one of my buddies was like, I was talking to one of my buddies, like, by the way, I'm dyslexic. He's like, could you pass the salt? And I was like, oh man, I'm such an idiot. No one cares. And I don't know why. So it really helped me just by not caring so little. He's like, he felt afterwards. He's like, oh no, I should care. I'm like, no, that's exactly what I wanted to hear. But at the time, okay, this is slightly. We have 5 minutes. I'll just give you the slightly longer version of this because I actually think it's something that is reasonably interesting. But at the time when I was coming like out of the closet, I just thought dyslexia was the main advantage. I would have told you is I never do things I'm bad at because I can see the delta between where I'm good and where I'm bad. And I still think, and then you develop a lot of discipline. Like I actually live a fairly disciplined lifestyle, and I think that's part of like training around that. But then my next phase on this, which is what I thought until recently, was, if you compare the way I solve problems to my very kind of high IQ family, they solve problems where their compute structure has more data, but at the end of the structure where you would be confronting things where there is no data or sparse data, I have an enormous advantage because I would process the sparse or non-existent data way before anyone else could, and much, 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 much quicker. And so like people, I always asked one of my colleagues, I'm like, well, it's like, well, we spent 2 days working on this and you decide in a minute, and there's some dangers in that. That's why sometimes you need minders. But de facto, if you're doing something years before other people, so that I thought that's a huge obvious advantage. Now I have a post-ontology addendum to this, which is that was really true till large language models came, and it was obviously why you see so many dyslexics in business. But now, what large language basically do is they commodify everything that's not original. So your core value proposition at least if that's defined by someone who will pay you for it, it's going to be what you do that's culturally or individually particular. Like, so particular idiosyncratic one-off talents become 50 times more valuable because the large language model cannot do that, but it can do everything else. And when you're dyslexic, you have an attenuated relationship to taxonomies. So, you know, if you're dyslexic, I'm dyslexic, you could define it any way you want. I would define it as a non-dyslexic reads and they are one-to-one with the taxonomy. A dyslexic, even someone who's, you know, I wrote a PhD in German, got a reasonably good grade, I used to do all the writing, you do all this writing. No matter how successful you are, you don't have the relationship to a lexicon or a taxonomy that's one-to-one the way a non-dyslexic would. Well, you could think of what are we navigating now? We're navigating a world where all taxonomies no longer quite work. You know, it's like the taxonomy of what it means to build a tech company, how you build it, what it means to be a nation, how you organize it, how you fight on the battlefield, how you defend yourself on the battlefield. None of the playbooks, like the playbook does not work. So everyone's good at doing the playbook. That's kind of an LLM. Everything else is the dyslexic. And this is why I kind of think we are going to be teaching everyone to be dyslexic. Like literally everyone. It's like you have a one-to-one relationship with, or you broadly speaking, with how to learn. And then for us, that one-to-one thing was always kind of, we had to use extra compute to get that. We need 10 units of compute and someone needs to. So basically you have to have a lot more effort. But actually now, when you're talking about what does an enterprise do? What does a nation do? Which nations are going to outperform others? Which institutions are going to outperform? Which people are going to outperform? What is actually valuable? It's all going to be the people who are specific as opposed to particular. By the way, this is yet another reason why this nation is just going to fly, because we're okay with calling ourselves a nation. And so that's much harder in Europe. It's much harder in Germany. Why does Palantir accelerate? Because we have a completely unique culture filled to the rim with completely unique people. Why did individual investors outperform the commoditized institutional investors? Because they're unique, because they looked at unique insights, because they processed themselves. Why do people who invest in their own thought, why do they have more happiness? Why do they have more freedom? Why do they have more wealth? Is that going to accelerate? And these are all metaphors for basically, if you want to be corny about, being your own individual dyslexic. And none of that worked well 6 months ago. Even at quote-unquote my level, it was very attenuated at a high cost. I was losing energy in basically because there wasn't a one-to-one glove fit. But now there is, and that's completely revolutionary for every institution and every individual, and exactly what we have to invest in. And it is actually what works now. The other stuff is suboptimal. And it's like even if you say, well, you know, so many people who invested in Palantir, you know, are just free thinkers. They weren't trained. But that's being a free thinker is like 10 times more valuable, being your own individual, your own country, your own way of doing things. Like you see this on the battlefield. The Ukrainians, Israelis, Americans, Brits, they all fight differently. They all want to fight. They need to fight. They have culture-specific ways. Clandestine services, all of them are organized in completely different ways, even if they have the same mission, because they're culturally specific. And then of course you have universal guardrails. Of course, I believe in that meritocracy, rule of law, various other things that are necessary, our Constitution in America. But it's the attenuated nature to the standardization, or you could call it in classic social reification. It's like the individual, the attenuation with the broader taxonomy and phenomenology that surrounds you is where all the value is. And that is actually the value of being dyslexic. Now, and it's just completely shifted. It's like, yeah.
The book is called The Technological Republic. He was, by the way, going to call it, do you remember what you would call it? The Revenge of the Dyslexic.
Oh, no, yeah, no, if it was done now, yeah. The Revenge of, yeah.
Alex Karp, everybody. Thank you.